2 years have passed since Dragon Quest Monsters 2 was released on the venerable Game Boy Color, and the machine's advanced successor had since become the dominant handheld on the market. The arrival of the Game Boy Advance meant new opportunities to expand and refine the formula, filled with more dragons, golems, and balls. I mean orbs. Yeah, orbs. Dragon Quest Monsters Caravan Heart was released in Japan on March of 2003, and indeed, Enix took the chance to alter the formula in a few ways that may or may not have been the best ones. Whichever way, Caravan Heart didn't get the official Western release treatment, nor has it received a modern port or a remake. But it did get an English fan translation back in 2008, which is what you're looking at here. Coincidentally, this was also the last game released by Enix as a standalone company. That same year, they would merge with Squaresoft to become Square Enix, a union which still remains to this day. But I'm sure you already know that. Squeenix isn't exactly a lesser-known company, for better or for worse. The premise is that you are Prince Kiefer, an adventurous troublemaker with the genius idea of throwing himself down a 2-story window. King Burns, your father, is about to roast you in response, but being a crafty little bugger, you escape to your room, where a handmaid helps you hide inside the closet. Once the king goes away, the handmaid checks the closet and is shocked to see that Kiefer has disappeared. Inside the closet, a very sus lady talks to you and claims that she will let you go on the adventure of your dreams. You step back outside and notice a warp gate, from which you can hear voices coming. So of course you jump into it. You're teleported into a forest where you spot a caravan in a bit of a predicament. Their leader has fainted and they need someone to take command and organize the group. And what better choice than a little kid they've just met? After a valiant struggle against two Drakis, the group's leader, a kid named Lewin, explains the situation. His parents are sick with an unknown disease that no medicine or magic can heal, so he took his father's caravan to search the world for a solution. Legends say that he who gathers the 4 orbs of Loto will be granted a wish, and Lewin's plan is to find these MacGuffins and make a wish to save his parents. Rumors say that these orbs are held by entities called illusions, and the first one just happens to live not far away. However, Lewin doesn't have the metal to serve as the caravan's leader, and that's where you come in. If you've played some of the mainline Dragon Quest games before, the name Loto should be familiar. Caravan Heart takes place in the world of Torland, where the first 3 mainline entries take place. These games are referred to as the Loto or Erdrick trilogy, depending on the translation you're following. The name comes from the lore, where the eponymous hero saved the world from an ancient evil, and the orbs come from the treasures wielded by him. However, the continent of Alefgard, where the events of the original Dragon Quest exclusively happen, has been sunk into the sea for reasons unknown. Once you gather the 4 orbs, it rises back into the surface so you can meet Magarugi, the so-called Master of Illusions that resides in the castle of Wadatum, or Tantagel as it's known in the official localizations. It's also important to mention that, just like how Monsters 1 was a spin-off from Dragon Quest VI, featuring one of its characters during their childhood, Kiefer is also a major character from Dragon Quest VII. Like Terry, here he goes on a wacky adventure that ends up shaping his adult self. Naturally, Kiefer goes back to his world after the credits roll, with everyone else in the castle none the wiser as to the potential PTSD that the poor kid just got inflicted with. But he does go back not much after, because the world is about to get sent into the Shadow Realm once more, and they need Kiefer's abilities to solve the problem. While there are various references to Dragon Quest VII, including a priestess named Foss, or Jacqueline I suppose, being in charge of the breeding mechanics, Caravan Heart is just as much a standalone expansion to the Roto trilogy as it is an expansion to Kiefer's backstory, helping to explain why he became such a free-spirited person. Either way, the story itself is a mostly heartwarming tale about a kid being thrown into an exciting adventure and helping his new friend cure his sick parents. The move to the Game Boy Advance also allows for a more accurate depiction of the Dragon Quest art style, thanks to its wider array of colors. The overworld also takes advantage of the system's hardware to deliver a pseudo 3D look to it, with characters featuring less squishy proportions similar to the PS1 remakes of the first two games. I mean, I love the squishy proportions of the Chibi-C titles, don't get me wrong. This top-down view with little deformed squares moving around really traces my race, if you know what I'm saying. But this has its own charm too, with its colorful dragons, golems, and whatever the hell this thing is. Caravan Heart has a linear story divided into chapters that progressively unlock new zones, each with their own towns and dungeons to explore. You meet the Illusion, you listen to their petty little requests, and then you go all over the place, trying to fulfill those demands. But nothing is ever so simple. On top of the random encounters with wild monsters looking to bite your face off, now you also have random events, some of which are positive and some of which are not. Sometimes you might find a traveling merchant or a generous lake goddess, but frequently you'll be getting assaulted by monsters that steal your food, or a friggin' clown that is just asking for my emulator's save states. You have to be prepared for anything, even more so because it turns out that people do have to eat. Just traveling the world and its many dungeons will continuously drain your stock of rations at different rates. If it runs out, your monsters will start losing HP, and surprise, 0 means game over. You can restock by consuming specific items or by heading to a shop, but it costs gold, and that's something you don't have much of at the start. So to avoid breaking the Dragon Quest timeline, do try not to die of starvation. Thankfully, the limit will also increase the more you travel, so the more you play, the longer you can sustain a trip. As for combat, the core setup is mostly intact, although several changes have been made. Like its predecessors, Caravan Heart has you build a party of 3 monsters, and you can either let them think for themselves or give them specific orders. Winning battles earns experience points, which lets monsters grow in level and learn new skills. However, the wild stats, genders, and personalities have been completely removed. The loss of the first 2 certainly makes things more practical, although not having personalities does mean that every monster will run on the same exact AI. Not a big deal in the grand scope of things, it just means that you might need a bit more micromanagement. The maximum number of skills that a monster can have at once has also been reduced from 8 down to 6, which means that you have to think a bit more carefully about your choices. Breeding still kind of works the same, but also kind of not. You can't recruit monsters like you could previously. Instead, you have a set of unique monsters acquired throughout the world, and these perform reformation to effectively become new monsters. This is done by combining two hearts, which contain the essence, I guess, of the respective monsters you acquired them from. The chosen party member will transform into the result of that combination, inheriting its current skills and learning those belonging to the resulting monster and its parents. The end result is much the same. They still get reset to level 1, they still learn new skills, and a portion of the previous form's stats is passed down. The immediate difference is that the monster's current list of skills will remain intact, instead of having to learn them once again through leveling up. The big gameplay addition is the namesake, the Caravan. Rather than individual monsters, you manage 3 different wagons, each one including 1 monster and 4 slots to place crew members, all of which have different abilities for combat and exploration. You start with the small group from the intro, and then recruit more members throughout the game, some of which join as part of the story, and some of which are completely optional. Unfortunately, there's a limit of 20 crew members, so you will have to kick some of them out at some point. Anyway, your crew will appear in the home camp, which is a very convenient place that isn't stuck to one location. You can tell everyone to pack up and then take them somewhere else and settle down. This means that you can place a healing and restocking point almost anywhere you want, whether it be next to a dungeon or a location that's more quickly accessible than the nearest town. During a battle, monsters take turns like normal, but your assigned crew members will also perform their respective actions in order. The first crew member performs on turn 1, the second performs on turn 2, and so on, until all of them have taken action and then cycle back to the first member. As the leader, you need to make sure that your formation takes advantage of your crew's individual abilities. For example, during combat, warriors will perform a physical attack, while clerics will cast a healing spell on their wagon's monster. Meanwhile, outside of combat, fishers can fish that fills your rations, and mappers will enhance the map with more details. Merchants will set up a shop in your camp, and thieves will add a storage function, so you don't need to return to town to stock up on rations and supplies or to deposit money. Crew members don't get attacked, nor do they spend MP to use their abilities, and you don't need to worry about their equipment, so the process is fairly straightforward. However, you still need to pay attention to the wagon's weight limit. Both the monsters and the crew members have their own weight value, and their total combined weight cannot exceed the limit. This means that you might have to go without a full wagon, or make some compromises. There are ways to increase this limit, but they are very rare, so don't count on them coming into play until late. Like its predecessors, Caravan Heart also features some extensive post-game content that is all about making your entourage as strong as possible. After the credits, you are free to roam Torwland once again, but you'll quickly notice some tents and caves that weren't there before. These are generated randomly and will allow you to acquire color orbs, either by purchasing them from NPCs or by delving into a dungeon and defeating the boss. Randomized crew members will also start appearing throughout the world, and these include second and third tier classes with more powerful abilities than the ones you can recruit during the story. Why is there a fisher called Jesus? Once you've collected some color orbs, you can head to a funky little place called Slime Land, which holds a shrine in which you can create orb dungeons by offering color orbs to the statues. The game generates randomized dungeons based on the number and type of color orbs used. You can offer up to 4, maxing out at 15 floors and altering the families of monsters that appear based on the types of orbs you offered. If you choose to offer 4 color orbs, you will also find one of 6 spirits at the last floor, which will grant you one of 3 rewards. They can award a stat boost to your monsters, they can give you a rare monster heart, or you can engage them in battle to earn a spirit orb, which will open a special dungeon leading to a very powerful boss. Once you get into the groove, Caravan Heart absolutely earns its own unique charm, especially during the post-game. The issue is actually reaching that point. The gameplay gets quite engaging later on, but the slow burn until then really makes me want to swallow a cacti ball. The core issue is that the game front-loads you with several hours of extremely dull combat and a lot of busy work. First, let's talk about rations. At the start, you can barely travel for more than a minute before you spend your entire stock, punishing you for exploring the world. You get piss all gold at the start, and what little you have is dumped back into rations so that you can walk another 50 meters without starving. The world map can be infuriating to navigate due to all of its curves and obstacles, and you're constantly thrown into random events that can take a bit of gold or rations away, or random battles where you do nothing except basic attacks, because you're stuck with a low-level slime that you can't replace since you can't recruit wild monsters in this game. You also start with a cleric that can heal your monster every single battle, so it's not like you're in any danger. Somewhat ironically, it almost nullifies the danger from running out of rations. It's not until 2 hours or so that you finally get a second wagon and monster, and then soon after you get a third wagon so you can walk around with a full party. This is when you can start playing with the reformation mechanics, and by this point you should also have a much bigger ration limit, as well as access to a fisher that grants you food items for free. All of this to say that at no point do rations add anything worthwhile to the game. You deal with them at the start because you have to, and you ignore it later on because you're never in any risk of running out. Unfortunately, most of the game continues with battles that give low amounts of XP and almost all of your crew members being utterly useless in combat. Obtaining hearts is also completely random, so you can't do much with reformation without grinding hard, because random battles are pretty tough, and going against bosses under-leveled is usually a death sentence. Bonus points for the large difficulty spike on the final boss of the main story, which has a ton of HP and can smack off half of your party's life with a single cast of Thordane. Screw you, Gramps, if it's so easy you can do it yourself. But once you do reach that last stretch, a lot of the game's annoyances quickly start evaporating. And once you clear the story and unlock the Orb Dungeon system, the game truly opens up and the streamlined mechanics get to shine. Though even there you have a few quirks with the combat balance, namely how it heavily favors physical power over magic. One factor is that individual crew members don't increase in power by themselves, since they don't level up, nor do they have equipment you can upgrade. Classes with physical attacks scale directly with the monster's attack power, so you're incentivized to make physically inclined monsters. Classes with magical spells simply never grow stronger. That magician you get at the start with the single-digit damage spell? Completely friggin' useless. Back to unemployed starvation. Actually, a lot of Caravan members do just seem to be useless in practice, while others are indispensable. Look, you're going to want a merchant and a thief no matter what, but mages are almost universally a waste of space. Several magic skills that were endlessly useful in the previous games also got nerfed into the ground, and it's really noticeable. Stuff like the breath skills that used to hit every enemy now only hit a single group. But because Caravan Heart really likes splitting multiple monsters of the same species into separate groups, there are very little opportunities for those skills to shine. There's also a couple of ever-present nitpicks to point out, like how the limit of 20 people in your caravan isn't enough for all of the story characters, or how the inventory carries a maximum of 24 items, but key items like the Heart Getter and the Loto Orbs can't be removed. Oh, and the color orbs also use regular inventory space. Who thought this was a good idea? Also, was it really necessary to recontextualize the breeding mechanics into the new reformation system? Ultimately, it makes very little difference. Suffice to say, my opinion of Caravan Heart is a bit mixed. It's a unique game with a lot to offer, and at the best of times, the changes it made to the formula are a straight upgrade. But is it any surprise that some fans treat it as the black sheep of the franchise? Opinions about the game are almost universally divided into two camps. One group that loves the endgame and the streamlined monster mechanics, and another group that doesn't really care about it because they tried it for an hour, got bored to tears and gave up. Caravan Heart front-loads the player with so much dullness in the first hours. There's so much padding, so much walking around, so many random encounters that give you piss-all experience points. Yes, the previous two games also didn't give you all of the good stuff until some hours in, but Caravan Heart feels grindy in a way that its predecessors never did. Sure, if you get over that entry barrier, you'll be rewarded with an addictive endgame. But it gets good after 10 hours is not a good hook. And ultimately, if one of the reasons that the game becomes enjoyable is because you can ignore some of its fundamental elements, then that's a bit of a cock-up, isn't it? Would I recommend playing Caravan Heart? Honestly, I don't know. It has a lot of genuine good to offer, even if I felt like Sisyphus while playing it for this video. Okay, that's an exaggeration. It's just mildly boring to go through the first hours. Still, if you're a fan of the Dragon Quest Monsters series and have avoided playing it for one reason or another, you should give it a try at the very least. It might be the black sheep of the series, but it has its fans for a reason.